New neighbor from hell started parking in my driveway without permission and refused to move because she claimed it was public property, so I called the police and HOA. Then she escalated into full-blown harassment until the courts stepped in. I never thought something as simple as a driveway would cause me this much stress. I moved into this neighborhood about 2 years ago. It's a quiet, well-maintained suburban area with tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a solid HOA that keeps things running smoothly. My house is at the end of a cul-de-sac, and I have a private driveway that leads right up to my garage, clearly marked, paved, and part of my property. For the most part, everything had been peaceful. I didn't have any drama with anyone on my street. We all waved politely when passing by, and the occasional block party or Halloween event gave the community a wholesome vibe. But things took a sharp turn about 3 months ago when the house next door was sold. The previous owners had moved out of state, and within a week, a new family moved in. I didn't meet them right away, but I noticed the noise. Lots of slamming doors, loud conversations on speakerphone, and kids yelling late into the night. Not unbearable, but definitely different from the quiet norm. Then I noticed something else. A black SUV parked halfway up my driveway one morning. I assumed it was a delivery, or maybe a visitor who didn't know better. I brushed it off and went to work without making a fuss. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Every morning, I'd wake up to find that same black SUV sitting squarely in my driveway, not blocking my garage entirely, but close enough to be annoying. At first, I left a polite note on the windshield. "Hi, just a heads up. This is a private driveway. Please don't park here." The note was gone the next day, but the SUV remained. Eventually, I knocked on their door to talk directly. A woman in her early 30s answered. Let's call her Lisa. I introduced myself and brought up the parking issue calmly. I expected a simple, "Oh, sorry," and that would be the end of it. But instead, she crossed her arms and gave me the most dismissive look I've ever seen. "That's not your driveway," she said flatly. "It's part of the neighborhood easement. We're allowed to use it." I was stunned. I told her, as calmly as possible, that it was not an easement. It was clearly outlined as part of my property in the deed. But she just waved her hand and said, "Whatever. It's not a big deal. Don't be dramatic." I walked away, completely baffled. Was this woman serious? I double-checked my property documents that night, just to be sure I wasn't the one confused. And no, my driveway was clearly, legally mine. No shared access, no public easement, nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a very deliberate problem. After our awkward conversation, I held on to a sliver of hope that Lisa would stop parking in my driveway. I figured maybe she was just defensive in the moment and would think twice about it later. I even waited a few extra days before reacting again, giving her the benefit of the doubt. I shouldn't have. Instead of stopping, she doubled down. The SUV didn't just show up in the mornings. It started staying parked in my driveway overnight. I'd come home from work and find her vehicle sitting there like it belonged. And when I looked around for her, I'd often see her sitting on her porch, watching me with this smug, unbothered expression. She knew what she was doing, and she wasn't even trying to hide it. At first, I tried to keep things civil. I left a second note, more firm this time. I even printed out a diagram from the county assessor's office showing the property lines, which clearly marked the driveway as part of my lot. I tucked it under her windshield wiper and hoped that logic might do the trick. The next day, the printout was crumpled up and stuffed in my mailbox with a sticky note on it. "You're wasting paper. Chill." That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with someone who just misunderstood boundaries. I was dealing with someone who didn't care. Then came the day she really pushed the line. One Friday morning, I had an early client meeting downtown. I walked outside with my coffee, briefcase in hand, ready to head out. And there it was again. The SUV. Only this time, it was parked even deeper into my driveway, partially blocking my garage. I couldn't get my car out without reversing carefully and hoping I didn't scrape her bumper. I knocked on her door, more frustrated than before. Lisa answered wearing pajamas and holding her phone, clearly annoyed. "Can you please move your car? I have to leave." She rolled her eyes. "I'm in the middle of something." I blinked. "Lisa, I'm going to be late for work. This isn't okay." She just shrugged. "Then take the bus. It's not my problem." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I ended up knocking on her door 2 more times before she finally stomped outside, huffing and puffing like I was the one being unreasonable. When she moved the SUV, she deliberately backed it up just a few feet, still on the edge of my property, still making a point. That day, I was late to my meeting, completely rattled. I kept replaying the exchange in my head, wondering if I was missing something obvious. But every time I thought about it, one thing became clear. I had tried to be polite. I had tried to be reasonable. But Lisa had taken that as a green light to walk all over me. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. After that Friday morning fiasco, I knew something had to change. I was tired of feeling trapped in my own home. And honestly, I was starting to get anxious every time I pulled into my neighborhood, wondering what new boundary Lisa would cross. That weekend, I decided to document everything. I took photos of her SUV parked in my driveway on different days, saved screenshots of our property lines, and even started a log of dates and times. I figured if this turned into a legal issue, I need all the proof I could get. It felt a bit extreme, but at that point, I didn't trust Lisa to back off on her own. The final straw came the following Monday. I had scheduled a grocery delivery that morning. When the truck arrived, Lisa's SUV was, once again, blocking most of my driveway. The driver had to leave the groceries on the curb because he couldn't get up to my front door. By the time I hauled everything in, some of the frozen items were already melting. I was livid. That's when I decided I was done playing nice. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. An officer came by about 30 minutes later. Lisa was home, of course, and stepped outside the moment she saw the patrol car. She immediately launched into her speech, claiming the driveway was communal space and she had every right to use it. The officer listened patiently, then asked to see my property documents. I handed over the printed deed, complete with diagrams. After reviewing it, the officer turned to Lisa and calmly explained that she had no legal right to park on my driveway and that continuing to do so could be considered trespassing. She looked stunned, like she couldn't believe someone was actually pushing back. But here's the kicker. After the officer left, Lisa didn't stop. She moved her car that day, sure, but the next morning, right back in my driveway. That's when I brought in the HOA. I sent an email to the board with all the evidence I had collected, along with a detailed timeline of events. Within 24 hours, the HOA president, a very no-nonsense woman named Carol, called me directly. She was furious on my behalf. Apparently, this wasn't Lisa's first time causing problems. Carol said the HOA had received a few complaints already about loud noise, late-night disturbances, and trash left out for days. Carol promised to send Lisa an official warning letter, and if the behavior continued, fines would follow. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy, and maybe I wouldn't have to deal with this forever. But I underestimated Lisa, because once she got that letter from the HOA, things didn't calm down. They got worse. I had foolishly hoped that the warning from the HOA would be enough to put an end to the nonsense. Instead, Lisa seemed to take it as a personal challenge. From the day she received the letter, she went from passive-aggressive to outright hostile. It started with subtle things. She began blasting music from her open garage in the early morning. Not just normal music, but bass-heavy club tracks that made my windows vibrate. When I stepped outside to grab my mail, she'd be accidentally watering her lawn and somehow always manage to spray in my direction. One time, I found a bag of fast food trash dumped on the edge of my driveway, still warm. Coincidence? I didn't think so. But then, she escalated. One morning, I walked outside and found that her SUV had been pushed so far up my driveway that it was literally blocking my garage door. I couldn't even open it. I had to call into work and explain I was going to be late again. I knocked on her door, but she didn't answer. Instead, she watched from an upstairs window, sipping coffee and smirking. I snapped a photo and sent it straight to the HOA. Carol was livid. She emailed me back within the hour saying Lisa would be fined, and if it happened again, they'd start legal action. That same evening, I noticed deep scratches on the side of my car. Not dents, but long, deliberate-looking scrapes across the driver's side door. I couldn't prove it was her, but the timing was too perfect. I filed a police report just in case. Then came the late-night disturbances. Lisa, or someone in her house, started knocking on my door at 1 or 2 in the morning. They'd run off before I could open it. Sometimes it was a loud bang, other times just enough to wake me up. Once, I heard giggling as someone ran away. It felt like some twisted game, and I was the only one playing without knowing the rules. Fed up, I decided to install security cameras. I mounted them discreetly around my property, one facing the driveway, another covering my porch, and one along the side yard. Within 2 days, they caught Lisa's teenage son tossing soda can onto my lawn and flipping off the camera. I sent the footage to the police and the HOA. That's when things really started to spiral. Lisa stormed over the next morning and started shouting on my front lawn about how I was spying on her family and harassing her. I didn't even open the door, just stood behind the curtains and hit record on my phone. The cops showed up 10 minutes later. They gave her a final warning and told her if she stepped foot on my property again without permission, they'd press charges. I thought that might scare her into stopping, but I was wrong. Lisa wasn't done, not even close. After Lisa's public meltdown on my front lawn, I realized this was no longer just a petty neighbor dispute. It was harassment. I wasn't just frustrated anymore. I was exhausted, on edge, and genuinely uncomfortable in my own home. So I did what I probably should have done much earlier. I lawyered up. A friend of mine referred me to a local attorney who specialized in property disputes and civil harassment. I brought in all the footage from my cameras, the emails from the HOA, the police reports, and the notes I'd been keeping since the beginning. He looked through everything, then sat back and said, "You've got a solid case." She's digging her own grave. That same week, one of my cameras caught something big. Lisa came out around midnight and walked right up to my car with what looked like a key in her hand. She glanced around, clearly checking for witnesses, and dragged it across the back panel of my vehicle. The screeching noise was audible on the recording. Then she casually walked back to her house like nothing happened. I watched it twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't. I sent the footage to the police and my lawyer. This time, the response was immediate. The next afternoon, an officer came by and took an official statement. Later that week, Lisa was served with a citation for property damage and a formal warning under the state's civil harassment laws. Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't sitting still either. Carol, the HOA president, organized a special meeting and invited all the residents on our street. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I walked into the community center, the room was packed. People I barely knew raised their hands to share their own experiences. Loud parties from Lisa's house, trash left out for days, even someone who had witnessed her screaming at their kid for riding a scooter too close to her driveway. By the end of the meeting, the entire room agreed that Lisa was a problem. The HOA voted to fine her the maximum amount allowed per violation, starting immediately. They also promised to petition for further legal measures if her behavior continued. I walked out of that meeting feeling supported for the first time in months. For once, it wasn't just me versus Lisa. The entire neighborhood had my back. Lisa must have sensed it too, because over the next few days, she went quiet. No more music, no trash, no late-night banging. Her car stayed off my driveway. For a moment, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was finally over. But of course it wasn't. Lisa wasn't done yet. And the worst part? She had one more card left to play. The silence didn't last. Just when I thought Lisa had finally backed off, she made one last desperate attempt to flip the script by filing a harassment complaint against me. I was served paperwork one Thursday morning. According to her, my cameras were violating her privacy, I was spying on her family, and my complaints were part of a targeted campaign to bully her out of the neighborhood. I couldn't believe it. The woman who had keyed my car, blocked my garage, dumped trash on my property, and verbally harassed me on multiple occasions was now trying to make herself the victim. Fortunately, I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The HOA issued a formal statement defending me, referencing multiple violations Lisa had committed and the video evidence I had provided. Several neighbors submitted written accounts of their own negative experiences with her. My lawyer filed a counterclaim, including all the surveillance footage, police reports, and screenshots I had collected over the past few months. When the court date arrived, Lisa tried to act composed, but the moment the video of her keying my car was played, her entire demeanor shifted. Her face flushed, she avoided eye contact, and her argument unraveled fast. The judge dismissed her complaint against me immediately and approved my petition for a civil harassment restraining order. She was ordered to stay at least 20 feet away from my property line, pay restitution for the damage to my car, and attend a mandatory conflict resolution course. The judge warned her that any further violations could lead to criminal charges. After that, things truly changed. Lisa stopped speaking to me altogether, which, honestly, was the best outcome I could have hoped for. Her car never appeared in my driveway again. No more trash, no more games, no more late-night knocks. But the damage to her reputation had already been done. Other neighbors had started avoiding her completely. She stopped showing up to community events. Her kids didn't play outside anymore. Her house sat dark most nights. No porch light, no movement, just stillness. Rumor had it she was trying to sell the place quietly, but given everything that had happened, no one in the area wanted to buy it. 3 months later, the for sale sign finally went up. And 2 months after that, the SUV was gone for good. A new couple moved in, an older retired pair who brought us cookies on their first weekend and apologized for the previous owners. I've never felt such instant relief. Looking back, it's still hard to believe all of this started with a driveway. But I learned a valuable lesson. Some people will take advantage of your kindness the second they sense hesitation. And the only way to stop them is to stand your ground, document everything, and never let up. Peace is finally mine again. And I don't take it for granted, not even for a second. Update 1. It's been about a month since Lisa and her family moved out. The quiet has been unbelievable. For the first time in what feels like forever, I can open my curtains without worrying about who's lurking across the driveway. My car sits parked safely every night. No more trash mysteriously showing up on my lawn. No more loud music at 6 a.m. No more stomping feet or shouting matches. And yet, just when I thought it was over, Lisa managed to reach back from the grave. It started with something small. I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a typed message that said, "You think you won? You're pathetic. Everyone knows what kind of person you really are." It wasn't signed, but I knew exactly where it came from. The wording, the tone, it had Lisa written all over it. At first, I laughed it off. Just some final pettiness. I tossed it in the trash and moved on. But then I noticed something strange happening online. A few neighbors messaged me on Facebook to ask if I'd started a community watch group. Apparently, Someone using a fake profile under a vague name like Neighborhood Truths had been posting in local groups accusing me of bullying Lisa out of the neighborhood. The posts were full of half-truths, twisted events, and completely made-up claims, like that I had been spying on Lisa's children or had threatened her family with violence. Luckily, most people didn't take it seriously. Many had seen Lisa's behavior firsthand or had heard the recordings and read HOA reports. But a few newer residents chimed in asking if any of it was true. That part stung. After everything I'd gone through to stop being harassed, now I had to defend myself all over again. I reported the fake profile and reached out to the group moderators. One of them confirmed the account had joined only weeks earlier, had no friends, and only posted about me. They banned it from the group. Still, the damage had been done, even if only a little. But here's the part that really got under my skin. About 2 weeks ago, I noticed a car slowly circling our cul-de-sac late at night. Not once, not twice, but on 3 separate occasions. It wasn't anyone who lived on our street. I finally managed to get a clear enough shot of the license plate using my security camera. I ran it through a friend who works in vehicle registration. And guess what? It was registered to Lisa's sister. She doesn't even live in our city. At that point, I called the police again and filed a report. I included screenshots, license plate info, and the anonymous letter. They couldn't prove malicious intent, but they agreed to add it to the ongoing file in case anything further happened. They also promised to send an officer out for a casual patrol every few nights, just to make their presence known. After that, things went quiet again. No more mystery cars. No more anonymous letters. For now, at least. I also met with the new neighbors who moved into Lisa's old house. They're a retired couple named Jim and Karen, and they've been nothing short of delightful. Jim mows both our front lawns just to stay busy, and Karen brought over banana bread their second weekend here. I cautiously asked if Lisa had left any mess behind or tried anything after moving, and Karen just rolled her eyes and said she was a nightmare to the realtor. That's all we know. I haven't told them the full story yet. Maybe one day, when we're sipping coffee on the porch or chatting during a barbecue. But for now, I'm just enjoying the peace. Still, I've kept the cameras up. I still document anything suspicious. And I still lock my doors tighter than I used to. Because if this entire experience taught me anything, it's that some people can't let things go, especially when they lose control. I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret calling the police, getting the HOA involved, or even taking legal action. Lisa tried everything she could to bully me out of my own home, and she failed. But I'd be lying if I said she didn't leave a few scars behind. Update 2. It's been just over 2 months since the last letter, the social media smear campaign, and those late-night drive-bys. Since then, things have settled down. Really settled, at least on the surface. The neighborhood has been thriving. Our HOA board even hosted a spring block party. The first one in years that didn't involve noise complaints or someone storming off in a huff. I helped set up tables, met a few new residents, and finally started to feel like I was part of the community again instead of a reluctant participant in a personal turf war. Jim and Karen, the couple who bought Lisa's house, have been incredible. Jim installed a little solar light in the front yard and keeps the place looking 10 times better than Lisa ever did. Karen and I have tea once a week now. She even jokes about naming the squirrels in our yards like we're in some suburban sitcom. It's light, easy, and the kind of neighborly vibe I didn't realize I was missing until I had it again. But of course, peace never stays completely untouched when you've dealt with someone like Lisa. About 3 weeks ago, I received an envelope in the mail with an actual return address this time. It was from a local small claims court. Lisa had filed a lawsuit against me for emotional distress and defamation. I stared at the papers in total disbelief. She was seeking a ridiculous amount, not just for emotional damages, but also for pain and suffering caused by false accusations, neighborhood embarrassment, and malicious intent to disrupt her family's peace. She cited the HOA letters, the police visits, the court order she lost, and, get this, the fact that I had ruined her ability to feel safe in her own home. I handed the papers to my lawyer, who barely blinked. He said this is a last-ditch move. She knows she has no legal ground, but sometimes people like this just want to make noise. Still, I was required to appear in court. So I gathered everything again. The original complaint, the footage of her keying my car, the statements from neighbors, screenshots of her fake social media accounts, the police reports, HOA fines, and the original ruling from the harassment hearing. When the court date came, Lisa showed up alone, no lawyer, dressed like she was attending a PDA meeting instead of accusing someone of causing psychological harm. She was calm, collected, almost rehearsed. But the second the judge asked for her evidence of distress, she crumbled. She didn't have a shred of proof. Just her word, vague claims, and a long, rambling speech about how she never felt accepted in the neighborhood. When it was my turn, my lawyer calmly presented our file. The judge barely needed 20 minutes to dismiss the case in full, and sternly warned Lisa that any further attempts to misuse the legal system would be considered harassment on her part. As much as I tried not to enjoy it, I have to admit, it was satisfying. Finally, someone in a position of authority, saw right through her. After that ruling, I didn't hear anything for a while. But just to be safe, I had my attorney file for a permanent restraining order. This time, it wasn't just for me, it extended to my property, mailbox, and even digital contact. If Lisa ever tried to message me, tag me, email me, or send someone her place, it would be a direct violation. And guess what? The judge granted it. Now, for the first time since this nightmare began, I feel like I can breathe. Not cautiously, not with one eye on the security feed, but actually breathe. And the funny thing is, I learned that most of my neighbors have been dealing with their own mini Lisa stories over the years, just smaller, less dramatic ones. People she snapped at for walking too close to her grass, or who she accused of stealing her Amazon packages, or who got notes on their door for parking too crooked. It wasn't just me. I was just the one who finally pushed back. Now, with her gone and legally silenced, the neighborhood has healed. We even created a shared contact list and neighborhood watch, not out of paranoia, but as a way to be more connected. Ironically, all the drama brought the street closer together. So where does that leave me? Well, I've started sleeping through the night again. I finally planted those rose bushes I kept putting off. I walk my dog without wondering who's watching. And every morning, when I walk out and see my clear, empty driveway, I smile. Because I fought for that peace. And I earned it. Final update. It's been 6 months since the court tossed Lisa's laughable lawsuit and issued the permanent restraining order. I figured it was time for one final update, just to close the loop, both for myself and for those of you who have been following along. Life is peaceful now. Really peaceful. And I don't mean just in the absence of drama. I mean in the small, quiet ways that feel almost sacred when you've lived under constant stress for so long. My mornings start with hot coffee on the porch, not checking security cameras. I don't flinch when a car turns around in the cul-de-sac anymore. I walk my dog past Lisa's old house, now the home of Jim and Karen, and I don't feel that knot in my chest anymore. In fact, I usually wave at Karen as she's pruning her garden. Sometimes she invites me in for muffins. The warmth and laughter that now fills that property is such a stark contrast from what it used to be that it feels like a different universe. But I won't lie, it took time to adjust. For weeks after the final court date, I was still on edge. I'd jump when I heard the doorbell. I'd scan social media to see if Lisa had found a new platform to complain about me. I even had a nightmare once that she'd moved in across the street and disguised herself with a wig and sunglasses. It sounds ridiculous, but trauma does weird things to your mind. That's when I decided I needed help healing. Not just a break from Lisa, but actual healing. I started therapy. Just a few sessions at first, but I kept going because it helped me recognize that the issue wasn't just Lisa. It was my lifelong habit of avoiding conflict, trying to keep the peace no matter what it cost me. The therapist asked me a question that really stuck. When did you start believing that being nice meant being silent? Oof. I realized that all those years of letting small things slide. Lisa's car inching into my driveway, the passive-aggressive comments, the way she'd use her kid as a shield, had conditioned me to think standing up for myself would make me the villain. But I wasn't the villain. I just finally said enough. And once I did, the world didn't end. It got better. I've since helped the HOA revise its bylaws about property boundaries, guest parking, and neighbor disputes. We even added a mediation clause so things don't escalate to full-blown drama again. I never thought I'd be that invested in HOA meetings, but here we are. I guess I realized that if you want your environment to feel safe and fair, you have to be part of shaping it. There was one moment recently that really brought everything full circle. I was backing out of my driveway one morning, late for work, and a delivery van had temporarily blocked the road. I felt my heart spike, not because I was annoyed, but because for a split second, it brought back the panic of Lisa's constant obstruction. But the driver saw me, waved apologetically, and moved along with a smile. And that's when it hit me. The problem wasn't driveways, or noise, or property lines. It was people who treat boundaries as challenges instead of mutual respect. Lisa wasn't my first neighbor from hell, and she probably won't be my last if I ever move again. But now I know what to look out for. I know what patterns not to excuse. And more importantly, I know how to respond. Not with fear, not with avoidance, but with clarity, consistency, and courage. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, whether it's a nightmare neighbor, a manipulative coworker, or a family member who drains you, let me say this clearly. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to set boundaries. And you are allowed to enforce them. It's not petty. It's not dramatic. It's survival. It's dignity. It's peace. And let me tell you, peace is worth fighting for.